Hey, everybody. Welcome to Conversations. We're so glad that you're joining us. And this is just kind of a little conversation that we're going to have on the heels of a sermon a couple weeks ago around race in the church. And we thought it'd be really cool for y'all to hear from someone here at Lifegate Church who has a fresh perspective on how race and faith intersect. And rather than just hearing me talk about it all the time, we thought it'd be pretty great to hear from one of our leaders and let you learn from them as well. So thanks so much for joining us. I have here with me Cameron Thomas, who has been at Lifegate Church for, you said, 20 years at Lifegate Church. Okay.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit about your family, about your background.
Okay. Well, let's say we landed here in 2000.
Okay.
My wife and I met at Bellevue Assembly.
Nice.
In the late 80s.
All right. So, which is now Bellevue Christian Center.
Bellevue Christian Center.
Okay. Yep.
Right. We met and married there. So we have 4 wonderful kids, all grown up, went to school here, and I've got 4 grandkids that come here pretty much. So, yeah.
So, and you serve here at Lifegate. In what capacity do you serve?
So we right now we're really involved in the 7 Pillars ministry for the sexual addiction.
Okay.
We're really enjoying that. And my wife is also working there for the restoration of women that have been hurt with, basically a men's addiction. So it's a good place to be. There's a lot of healing that's going on in that area.
Yep.
So
that's really great.
I'm glad to be involved.
It's huge. And you're also on Pastor Les's prayer squad.
On the prayer team, yeah.
Yeah.
So we get to have the opportunity to pray for you, for him, for the church, and that's kind of really that's a joy. So we've been doing that for a couple of years.
I love it. Thanks for serving in those ways. I hear amazing things about what's happening in 7 Pillars, and is the women's side Beyond Betrayal, correct?
Beyond Betrayal, that's correct.
So love that we can do that. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, give us a little bit of your kind of spiritual background, some of your spiritual story.
Okay. I grew up in a Presbyterian church here in town.
Okay.
We interacted. We're at the time of life when Oral Roberts was traveling around. I was in 8th grade.
All right.
And so that was kind of the beginning of some kind of spiritual roots. Yeah. But not real deep. Okay. Relatively shallow at that time, and so we went off and did college and kind of lived a little not like the Christian life that probably my mom was hoping for.
Yeah.
So we and it wasn't until after my father passed, I started getting some. I was just lost. I really was just lost, and but I'd had this little green Bible from somebody had handed me a little Bible on campus. And, And then I had a friend sending me tracts because they just knew I was depressed, I was lonely, I was broke, I was unemployed.
Wow.
And I started reading, and I just read and I read and I read, and God just really started doing things inside of me, which is a good moment. I said that's when I got to see Jesus. I was sitting up late one night. Probably stoned, more than likely, and I happened to be flicking through channels, and I popped up on the TBN, and they had this picture of Jesus, and he was out in this field playing with some kids, and I thought I just never thought of God like that, just human, and that really that intrigued me. And
interesting.
And I kept diving in and wanting to know more and more, and then I landed at Glad Tidings for a minute, and I spent a couple of years at Bellevue Christian Center. Like I said, we got married there. We spent 10 years in leading worship at a small mission plant church in North Omaha.
Okay.
And then we landed here.
Wow.
About 22 years ago.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I mean, seems to be like there might be a lesson from that Jesus can meet you when you're stoned. But maybe don't get stoned to meet Jesus. Maybe that's the line. That's pretty great. Awesome. Well, what a great story. Well, we've loved having you here over the last couple decades. That's longer than I've even been here. I'm curious about your experience as a black man at Lifegate Church, which is predominantly white. Yeah. And obviously you've lived through many seasons of your life here at Lifegate, many seasons probably of your spiritual journey and growth, I'm sure. Your kids obviously all grew up here. So just talk to us a little bit about, first of all, how has your faith and your race intersected in your life. And let me just say this before you go too deep.
Okay.
We talked about this earlier. You represent Cameron Thomas, right?
Right.
You don't represent
Right.
everybody
Right.
in your race, and yet your story matters, and your story is important, and that's why we're having these kind of conversations. And so, yeah, how has faith and race intersected in your journey?
You know, and I thought, I've been thinking about that. It's a really good question. When initially, probably when I started in, this whole get to know thing, meet Jesus, learn about the community, learn about people, I really felt like Sunday morning was the most segregated time of the week.
Oh.
Black people went to church in black churches, white people went to church in white churches, and never the twain shall meet. I mean, that's really how it felt.
Did the Presbyterian church you grew up in, was that predominantly white, or?
It was predominantly black.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, I went back and visited there, and and there just seemed to be this great divide.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, this is one of the things about, and I think not everybody feels this way, but generally, as a black person, you're counting how many people are in the room. They're like
Really?
me. I mean, so you're always aware.
Yeah.
You walk into a situation. Oh yeah, there were like 5 black people here.
Okay. All right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
And so there's this movement. You're always having to get comfortable. I mean, speaking of which, I remember when we first dropped in here, and I'd been leading worship for years, and our worship was really very bassy driven, and boom, yeah. And so I was learning this new. It was. I mean, I've always enjoyed our worship, but I was learning to be myself in worship, and I like to dance.
Yeah.
And I was like, I
I've
can't
seen you
dance because I'm around all these other people, and
Yeah.
maybe I think I'm weird. So there was always these
Interesting.
these little things.
Yeah. So when you talk about kind of counting the people in the room, is there a sense that you're almost like doing that? I'm sure kind of naturally, but are you doing it to try and figure out how to interact, or is it like?
That's a great question. It has something to do with that.
Yeah.
You want to know, can I be comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
Is this place accepting of who I am?
Yeah.
That's kind of, I think that's, if I was really just kind of bring that out.
Yeah.
So that was kind of at the beginning. That was one of the things I was trying to work my way through.
Gotcha.
The way that people say it right now, is it a white man's faith?
Yeah.
And
I've heard that.
Yeah, and probably where I was at the time, I was in my, mid to late 20s.
Okay.
And I was trying to figure out who I was as a person. Where do I fit? So asking those questions. How does my color? How does that define me? Those are questions that I was wrestling through all the way, for a long time. Mm-hmm. We were very fortunate, and in Bellevue Christian Center, I mean, there were a lot of people of color, which was which was helpful.
Okay.
Then we spent 10 years at 24th and Ames.
Okay.
With all people of color.
Right. So then when you came to Lifegate, was there, did it take a while to settle in, or was it just kind of you had a kingdom mindset and you're like, hey, we're all kind of the same? Like, what was that like?
By that time, I really did have more of the mindset that I'd kind of gotten into this deal of, and I say this to people all the time, I'm commanded to love you, and I like you by choice.
That's good.
So
I like it.
I just love people, and
that's beautiful.
That has really been the, people talk about anxiety. I've experienced being anxious, but as I've got more concerned about who's around me and how am I interacting with other people, how am I taking care of them, I think less about myself. I find myself less anxious.
Yeah.
I don't worry about it, and so it was. For me, it was a strength of a lot of different reasons. Jesus says do it this way, so I just did it this way.
Yeah.
So by the time I got here, it wasn't that big a deal.
Okay.
I was a little bit older. I was in my mid-40s by that time.
Okay.
And it just wasn't huge. it made me think about my kids, and so I asked them, "Hey, what was your experience like here at Lifegate?" Because we're in an interracial marriage.
Okay.
I call them an IRC. Me and my IRC. I like
Okay.
it. 'Cause what's good enough for other folks ain't good enough for me. But I asked them, "Well, what did you think?" Because you're even though you're half black, half white, you appear black.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and they all said, "Well, you taught us that race didn't matter, and we didn't really see it, and we didn't really have a whole lot of problems." I mean, there were some silly things that people have said. We've had occasionally someone will make a statement out of ignorance. It's just, oh well, but it's not a big deal. But 4 children, and the 4 of them said, "Good experience for us."
Wow.
Here.
That's really cool.
And I say that. It's been a good experience for me here as well.
That's really great.
A lot of friends, a lot of encouragement, we've just developed a lot of good friendships.
That's really good. I love that. So it sounds, obviously y'all have had very positive experiences, both sounds like growing up in more, in churches where there's more minorities, and then here at Lifegate, which is more white. Do you, how would you say, like, having lived this for a while now, where the church finds itself today, in America in 2022, how do we interact with a culture that is acutely aware of all things race?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this. Again, I think maybe as I was listening to your sermon, I was thinking about it the week or two before. Just this idea. We had just been recently in Charleston and spending some time going through some plantations and listening to the stories. And I came up with this thought that race right now is about 3 different things in the church.
Okay.
There's a biblical interpretation we got to think about.
Okay.
We have to think about historical interpretation of what's happened, and we have to think about culture. So I think biblically, we're all the same. I mean, this is what the Bible tells us. We're all one in Christ. Boom. It really shouldn't matter as far as what we learn from Scripture. The kingdom of heaven is just the kingdom, and we are just members inside of it. We're all His temple. We're all His property.
Yeah.
We should be all the same.
Okay.
That's our biblical understanding.
It's good.
It will be wonderful when we get there.
You're right. I know. It's going to be great.
But because we have this history,
Yeah.
we have a history that also involves people that have been marginalized, enslaved. But one of the realities there is almost every people group at some point in time around the world has been enslaved too.
Yeah.
I wish that, and this is probably speaking to where our culture is today,
Okay.
I wish that we chose different things to focus on. I was thinking, when we were in Charleston, they were talking about the fact that slavery was abolished in 1865. My grandfather on my mom's side was actually born in 1866, so I think that's kind of cool.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So, but in 1870, the first African American was in the Senate. 5 years.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
5 years. 1875, the second one was in the Senate. So in 10 years, we had 2 people risen from slavery to being senators.
Interesting.
And I thought, this is how resilient the people were.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is really a part of the story that I think that we don't really tell and focus on.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
It makes a difference.
Yeah.
It makes a difference when you see, there are 2 sides of my family. And one side of the family, the side that was born so close to slavery, has a lot less success than the other side. We have doctors and lawyers on one side, and we have just common folk on the other side.
Okay, yeah.
But, you have people that just came out of slavery and just did phenomenal. Just, and they pressed through in education, they pressed through in relationships. And then, on the other side, you have people that were so wounded, had such trauma, and they weren't able to press through. And they fell into areas where they, again, on this side of the family, we had my mom's mom and dad were run out of the city because of for fear of one of the kids getting hung.
Oh my gosh.
You just two completely different things going on.
Wow.
So again, it brings it back to the culture today. What happens? We have to figure out a way um, to do life with one another.
Mm-hmm.
One of my author principles, and I said this even before becoming a Christian, I would say this: you're only black. I dated a lot of white girls. Okay, sorry, but you're only black until people know you, and then once they know you, you become just another person. And so I think that's the probably the challenge of the church today is we need to know each other.
Yes. Yeah.
You know?
That's a great insight.
Yeah, people are kind of scary. You got to know them.
Yeah. And that cultural piece is huge. I love those three things: the biblical, the historical, and the cultural.
Yeah.
I think it's easy, even for the majority culture, for the white people, to look at the biblical and just say, that's enough. Like, can we not all just move on? And we can sometimes ignore the historical and the cultural. And so that's really interesting that we do have to take all three of those things into account. God does have an ideal and a desire for what his family looks like, but we do live in a world that is not yet at that ideal. When you bring up the cultural, it just kind of reminds me of the difference between, like, when we talk about race, what we're really talking about is culture, right? Like, it's because an African American who grows up identifying more with the majority culture might be very different than an African American who grows up very much, and that's true for Latin Americans, it's true for Asian Americans. I mean, it's true for white Americans.
Right.
And so I think race tends to be an external marker that kind of gives us a clue into what culture this person might be coming from. We have to be careful of how much we try to interpret that external marker, because we may discover that particular individual looks some way, but culturally that's not at all where they're coming from. And then that's a whole other form of stereotyping and minimizing people. So I like in your interaction, in the community or in even the faith community, you can take either of these questions. How has that felt for you? Like, do people kind of feel like you said, you're a black person until they know you, and then you're Cameron. Do you feel like you navigate that on a regular basis?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
That's super insightful, and because you get pigeonholed all over the place. Well, you're probably going to respond like this, or you should think like this, think this way, or which is this is interesting. It's interesting for a black conservative. To why can't you think the way you want to think? Why can't you just add up things and go, well, I view things like this? Well, our community tells us that you're not black if you do that. That's not fair.
Right, yeah.
Broad strokes don't work well anywhere, and that's kind of why I don't like the white privilege message. That it's too broad. It's too broad a stroke. Everybody doesn't get privilege.
That's good. So with all that, you think the three things you brought out, I think, are brilliant practicals. Like, how can we as a church do better? Whether that's internally, as a fellowship, as a family, or externally in the communities where our campuses find themselves. Any thoughts on what we could do different or better, or maybe even what we're doing well?
We're doing good. I think we do a lot of things well.
Okay.
So the big things that I think there are, I just listened to an interview recently. I can't think of the lady's name, but she said this: I don't want to see less poverty. I don't want you to be less poor. That's not a good goal. And I thought, the goal is really that we want people to experience the life of the kingdom. We want Jesus' life.
That's good.
And so that being our focus, we think that along those lines.
That's really good.
Her statement was she wanted people to feel prosperous, or to be prosperous, and I think that's an area where I think we can do some strategic thinking. How do we help people not just be, like I said, less poor, but how do we help people to elevate up the next levels? So because I think.
Do you mean that like materially, or do you mean it like in their mindset? Like, explain that a little bit.
But I think it's both.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's our world. Again, we interact around what capital we have. We interact around what opportunities we have. And while it doesn't make, that is not a final determiner.
Yeah.
It's that same problem that we just talked about. Here's biblically we should do this. But culturally we are inundated with these messages all the time. And so we're just, and while I don't think that, I don't know what the role of the church is. How do we get in and make this better? I can't say that I know that for certain. But giving people opportunities, giving people voice, I think that's important.
Yeah, that's really good. That's great.
And support. I like support.
Yeah, that's good. So, kind of related to that, something that I shared in the sermon a couple weeks ago was, and really kind of addressing those who are like ready to see more diversity at Lifegate. I actually like the phrase, more than diversity, I actually like the phrase cultural unity or ethnic unity. I think that's more what the gospel is going for. It's not just diversity in the room or at the campus, but it's actually unity of diverse peoples.
Yeah.
I think that's what the gospel is communicating. And so I like the idea of ethnic unity. And so for those who are like ready for us to be there, like today, I made this statement. I believe that slow growth is often the healthy kind. And someone brought up to me and they said, you know what, black people have heard that forever. And that can be a hard thing for them to hear. And maybe I could have said it more compassionately, but I'm still pretty convinced it's the way to go. But here I am with you. And I'd love to hear how that statement hits you, and just be as honest as you want to be.
I think it's, again, I'm not like everybody else. And I want to tell a quick story, and I remember this is why we're not all the same. I had a guy in my office once, and we got talking about something, and he was telling the story about his grandfather. And his grandfather had been beaten up, castrated, and thrown in the river because he was too good with his money, and the people that around him at the packing house didn't like that.
Wow.
That brought some generational ideas and thoughts all the way down to him that I don't necessarily share, right? I mean, I was fortunate not to have that same kind of history.
Yeah.
But
wow,
we don't all think the same because of our histories.
Yeah. Yep.
I think the slow growth is a great idea because again, we need to be intentional about meeting people. We're scared of things we don't understand. If we understand one another, if we're developing relationships and we know each other, I think some of those things disappear. So I think the slow growth, to me, is a good statement. We're not going to fix things by, we won't fix a problem that started like overnight.
Yeah, 400-year-old problem we won't fix tomorrow, right?
No.
Yeah.
But the culture of loving people, the culture of being willing to sit across the table. I like you said about inviting people to lunch, sit down and talk, hear the story, listen.
Yeah.
I think those are big things that are moving in the right direction.
Cool.
It may be, John Maxwell said that the larger the project, the longer the runway. So makes sense.
That's a good line. Yeah. So maybe a good, takeaway for people is have somebody that you don't normally hang out with to coffee, to lunch, and, just start there.
Right.
And if the whole church is doing that across all kinds of lines, generational and other things, it could be kind of interesting to see what happens. So,
yeah. It's almost like we need each other.
Yeah, almost. Yeah.
Imagine that.
Yeah. I think God knew what he was doing when he threw a bunch of people in a room together and said, this is my new family.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Cameron, for being with us. And I want to thank y'all for joining us at this first episode of Conversations. We'll have a couple more coming out as well. And so I want to encourage you, give us feedback. We'd love to hear from you as well on how all of this hits you. These are big topics that we're talking about, and we just really want to see what Scripture has to say, see what the Holy Spirit is saying to us as a fellowship, and be able to follow along. And that requires all of us to be able to do that. So I'm going to encourage you to just join the journey with us as we attempt to become a church that looks more like heaven. Y'all have a good one.